Hi, and welcome to this episode of Pictures on My Mind. In this episode, I'll be talking about how you as a photographer actually manipulate your subject when you're making a portrait. And I don't mean like making them paint themselves blue and break dance and hold a lampshade. I mean just purely talking to someone when you're taking their picture can have drastic consequences in the way those photographs look. It's something that you can do consciously. It's something that we probably all do unconsciously, and in the video I'll discuss a number of photographers and how that's had an effect on the portraits that they've made. For me, myself, I love photographing individuals. I'm all about a kind of one-to-one connection with the person that I'm photographing. If you look a lot of my books I've done over recent years in A Guide to England and one in the Lone Star State, you'll see there's not many group shots in there, at least formal group shots. I mean, there's clusters of people. When it comes to saying to someone, hey, can I take your portrait? Very often it's just going to be that one person. And I think there's something very powerful about an exchange from one person talking to another. It's something that happens a lot in commercial photography, whereby you'll be hired to do a portrait of someone, and usually it might just be them, but you know, in the top end of the game, a person can walk in, or you can end up at the location to shoot them, and their agent's there, their publicists there, their friends are there, other people are there, and it can get very hard to kind of focus that one person's attention on you and on the camera to get the portrait that you want. And I've heard many stories over the years of photographers just saying to entourages like, on your bike, I'm just going to try and get a one-to-one with this person, and that's how they work. And I think for me personally, if I was in that situation as well, I think it's a really important thing to kind of stipulate, like trying to get that one-to-one connection with that person. Other photographers that I know, when I was a student, I heard one photographer came to do a talk, and he said if he had 10 minutes to do a portrait, if it was a really quick portrait, he'd spend 8 minutes just talking to them, just trying to build up that connection. Then he only used like 2 minutes to photograph, and that's how that photographer worked. So there's obviously lots of different ways you can do this. For me, it's all very much about communication and focus, and I think one photographer that's really interesting to explore is Richard Avedon. Richard Avedon was a top fashion and celebrity photographer from 1944 to 2004. You probably know him for that very amazing portrait he took of Marilyn Monroe. It's like a very odd portrait of Marilyn Monroe. You know, she's not beaming a smile, she doesn't look very kind of vivacious. It's a very unguarded moment. And that's because what Avedon employed, like a lot of really good portrait photographers, is not taking the given opportunity. As in, if you're photographing someone who's very used to being photographed, they're going to put on this kind of face that they put on when they're being photographed. We all do. It's one of the things you come up against when you start doing street portraiture, is you say to someone, oh, you look amazing, can I take your portrait? And the minute you raise the camera, they slap on this big fake smile. And yeah, we all do it. But the weird thing, I think for me personally, as a portrait photographer, any day of the week, I'd rather have a sincere frown than an insincere smile, okay? And what's amazing about Richard Avedon's portrait is, yeah, it's this kind of in-between moment. And Marilyn, she looks in such deep thought, okay? It's an amazing portrait. Later on in his career, he became quite sick. He also became quite disillusioned, I think, with the kind of commercial state of play and what was going on for him as a photographer. And that's when he set out on this 5-year project called In the American West. And that's, In the American West is how I discovered his work as a student in the early noughties. Okay, there's an amazing big book. It was in the library, and wow, you know, these giant, large format 10:8 images, black and white, really punchy. And yeah, that's something that really kind of connected with me. It's the kind of photos we all photocopied and we had up in our rooms when we were students. He had a crew helping him, and with their help he photographed 762 people on approximately 17,000 sheets of 10:8 film. Now, that's cool and the work's great, but my God, man, you know what I mean? I feel like some of the photo projects I've done, I've been kind of so limited by my time and resources. Like, I'd like to set a challenge to anyone. Let's just give anyone 17,000 sheets of large format film and a load of assistants and see what they come up with. Okay, I'm not discrediting the work. It is amazing, of course, and I love Avedon, but wow, 17,000 sheets of film, 762 people photographed. I don't know off the top of my head how many people are in the book. I'll try and check it out and write it in the notes, but yeah, anyway, I'm digressing here. But yeah, an amazing photographer, okay? And the one thing that I want to talk about is, for one, his photographic style. So He liked to use a waist level viewfinder when shooting medium format. So it's something that I employ as well, where you're kind of looking down, but you can also have that eye contact with the subject. In the same way when he's shooting large format, once that film is in the large format camera, you can't see through it anyway. That's when you're looking at your model and you've got that shutter release cable. So very much for him it was about focusing on that moment, really having that kind of focus on the model, not through the camera, not having the kind of Cyclops camera blocking the view of him, unable to kind of keep that eye contact. So again, that's something really cool. And it came into play when he had to photograph some very famous people. So yeah, those famous people he had to photograph was Wallace, Simpson and the abdicated King Edward VIII, okay? They'd become a very famous couple internationally. King Edward was basically saying, hey, I've met this woman, she's not royalty, I'm going to abdicate the throne. They were photographed loads, they were very used to being photographed, they had a very polished kind of media image. And there was a bit of a downside to that, because they hung out with fascists. Yeah, they hang out with Oswald Mosley, who created the British Union of Fascists. There's photos of them hanging out with Hitler. And yeah, that's not cool. And when Richard Avedon had the opportunity to photograph them, just before he photographed them, this is, I don't know, I'm not sure if this is true, but it's a good story. Supposedly Diane Arbus, the photographer, told them that the couple loved dogs. So with this information, Richard Avedon was photographing them on a medium format waist level camera. They came and they sat in front of him. He framed it up, he focused it, and as he was looking at them, he said, on the way here, driving to the shoot, I ran over a dog and I killed it. I'm paraphrasing, but something like that. And the minute they pulled like a shocked face, bang, he took the photo. And in the photo, it's not very flattering. And the photo caused an international sensation. It was wild at the time. And yeah, the bottom line is whatever you think about that act of manipulation to get the pictures, obviously, yeah, Avedon felt quite strongly against kind of that kind of behaviour the couple had done, hanging out with fascists. And where's the quote? Let me get this right.
I wanted to bring out the loss of humanity in them, not the meanness. And there was a lot of meanness and a lot of narcissism. So that I knew exactly what I had to try to accomplish during the sitting. I photographed them in their hotel suite in New York, and they had their pug dogs, which they adored, and they had their Ladies' Home Journal cover faces on. They were posing royally, and nothing, not for a second, was anything that I'd observed when they were gambling presented to me. And I did a kind of, it's like living by your wits. I knew they loved their dogs. And I said, if I seem a little hesitant, a little disturbed, it's because my taxi ran over a dog. And both of their faces dropped because they love dogs a lot more than they love Jews.
Pretty full-on stuff by him. And yeah, he felt that that was the thing to do. And obviously that's a very extreme example of what you say to your subjects to get a response, but that's what Avedon did, and that's the photograph that he got. Another great photographer to discuss, or rather artist, is Douglas Huebler. So he was formerly a sculptor, and then he ended up kind of going into photography, but very much conceptual photography, and he'd set these kind of weird little exercises. He called them variable pieces. And I'll just do a bit of bio on him. Previously a minimalist sculptor, Huebler in the late 60s renounced the making of discrete objects, saying that the world is more or less full of objects, more or less interesting. I do not wish to add any more. I prefer simply to state the existence of things in terms of time and place. He then pioneered a radical new use of photography, anti-subjective, sequential, and not in the service of aesthetic perfect moments, but rather a form of representation, like language to be interrogated. His deadpan photographs are a new kind of dematerialized artwork, used in tandem with other forms of documentation, such as maps, diagrams, and text. The work is part of a series predicted on the fictive premise of photographing everyone alive. And the piece I'm going to talk about is variable piece number 34 that he shot in 1970. During November 1970, 40 people were photographed at the instant exactly after the photographer said, "You have a beautiful face." And that's it. That's the project. And you're simply seeing that reaction of the person to that statement and how it varies across the people being photographed. And it's interesting to see how they each individually respond to that statement, okay? He did loads of projects like this. So imagine my surprise when I saw some work going viral in 2016 by an 18-year-old student called Shea Glover, a high school student in Chicago. And this is what it said on Board Panda. She conducted a social experiment. Do you know what she did? She posed people in front of her camera and told them, "I'm taking pictures of things I find beautiful." Pretty damn similar. Anyway, what's funny is there was no mention of Huebler in it, and I hate to say it, guys, at that point, it'd been a long time since I was at art college, I forgot Huebler's name, but I was kicking myself trying to find out this guy's name. But anyway, yes. So an interesting thing there is, did the photographer know about Douglas Huebler? Was she just completely ripping him off? Or is it just one of those funny little ideas that you have in photography where, you know, a lot of people have different ideas. A lot of people might have a similar idea, and how one photographer did it in 1970 and another photographer did it in 2016, okay? And obviously the photographs are very different, and the way Huebler lays his work out is very different to Shea Glover. Now, I had something recently that was really amazing for me. I'm a massive fan of the writer Jon Ronson, okay? Jon Ronson's like an incredible writer of narrative nonfiction, does amazing podcasts, and for me as a young photographer coming up, the minute I read them, Adventures of Extremists and The Men Who Stare at Goats, I was like, wow, this guy, he's kind of going gonzo in a similar way I'm going gonzo doing my documentary photography, and I really got into it. So I ended up paying to do a workshop with him in London a few weeks ago. And of course, I had to take my medium format camera because I had a couple of shots left on a roll. I thought, I got to do it. So it got to the first break, and obviously lots of people are chatting to him. It's a long day. He's talking constantly. I didn't want to take up too much of his time. So I took him outside and I started photographing. And I stood him in the shade. It was much more even light. There was kind of dappled light on the other side. I was able to put on quite a narrow depth of field, an f2.8. And as I took the first photograph, I realised I was having trouble focusing. And a kind of a crappy thing for me is I'm 42, and when I hold things really close to my eyes, I'm having trouble focusing. It's a bit heartbreaking because I've used my Bronica for so many years. But anyway, so I'm trying to photograph him, and the first shot is very much Jon Ronson pose, and it's a great pose, and it's a lovely pose, and it's a smiling pose, but it still feels like a bit, this is the Jon Ronson press photo, right? I keep photographing, and it's weird because in my head, I start apologising to him, and I say what I just said to you. I say, "Sorry, John, sorry it's taking so long. I'm having real trouble focusing. My eyesight isn't what it used to be. My long sight's great. I can't focus very close to this screen." And the next shot, you can see he looks quite concerned. And then he looks like, well, no, first shot, sorry, the next one is he's kind of listening. That's it. You can see he's listening in the photograph. And the next shot is kind of concerned. And as it goes through these images, you see his expression change as he's responding to what I'm saying. And you know what the craziest thing of all is? If you watch the entire clip of me photographing, I took like 6 photos of him in 60 seconds. But in my head, because of how quick I used to be focusing on that camera, I felt like it was just taking forever. But anyway, obviously I had no idea. I mean, I could see his expression I was photographing. I did not tell him that to elicit a change in his expression. I did it, again, because I felt awkward. And obviously, if you know anything about Jon Ronson, he's pretty neurotic as well. So it's probably also why he's one of my heroes, because, yeah, we got that going on together. But yeah, I love the portraits I took of him. And it's just one of those weird things where by talking to him, even in the space of 60 seconds, there were so many changes in his expression. And yeah, that was through no game in my part. I didn't plan to do it to change his expression like Avedon did. And I didn't do it as like a clever conceptual kind of game like Huebler. I just did it because it's part of my character. And I think that's the real kind of finale of this video, is that as long as you photograph someone in a one-to-one and you're kind of trying to be true to yourself and like who you are, and that's such a bloody new age thing to say. It's the wrong way of putting it. Just, I don't know, man, just be comfortable. And like for me, sometimes I am uncomfortable, and then I sort of share that. I don't know, it's weird, isn't it? It's like, it's almost trying to be honest. And I think that's something really special about photography is, you know, don't forget, not all cameras, but some cameras have mirrors in. And maybe there's a little allegory there about how you present yourself to your subject. If you present yourself with artifice to a subject, maybe you'll get artifice back. If you can try and be really clear and true and direct and honest with your subject, maybe that will come through in the photograph. Or maybe I've just thought about this far too long. But yeah, anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you've got some ideas of kind of wacky stuff that's happened to you doing portraits of people, please put it in the comments. If you dug the video, please like it. And of course, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. The show's going really well. I've been doing this for about a month now, and I'm still really enjoying it. So yeah, I hope you're enjoying it too. Thank you.